Welcome to the show. I am so excited to have joining me today, Chloe Skerlak. She's a fertility awareness educator, and she's here to talk to us today about how we can understand our bodies and our health as women a little bit better. Thank you so much, Chloe, for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I mean, this is a topic that I love to discuss. So yeah, here we go.
You are so passionate about this topic, and I've been, following your content online and just speaking to you now, seeing how passionate you are about this subject. It's no wonder that you've been doing it for so long and that your message is really spreading out there, because I think it's a really important subject that we don't really talk a lot about, is sort of our fertility and menstrual cycles and sexual health and all of these things. And there's a lot of different taboos, especially depending on where you live and how you grew up and sort of the cultural surroundings. And not only really important for our own happiness and ourselves to talk about this, but really just for our medical health and things like that, and be able to educate our daughters on this as well, and to make sure that, everything really runs smoothly. So it's a very important topic. So I'm really excited to have you.
I'm super excited to be here.
Thank you. And also, I feel like I'm a little bit undereducated in this subject. Like, realistically, I remember in 6th grade, they had sex education, and that's really the only time you really talk about these subjects and menstrual cycles and all of that. And I remember being too embarrassed to get the permission slip signed by my parents, because I wasn't sure if I'm supposed to get this signed or what it was. So I sat out that day. And so I always felt like I didn't understand a lot of the basics of, like, even things like your period and cycles like that and fertility. And I'm sure there's a lot of us out there that kind of feel like, we know because we go through it. We have our periods and all of that. We have babies even, but nobody really breaks it down for us. And like things like ovulation. I mean, I understand that there's ovulation, but I don't really understand the dynamics of it. So can you give us a little bit, Chloe, of first of all, I guess, really what you do? And also, I'd really love to hear from you sort of like the basics 101 about this subject in general. What are the things that we should be aware of, that we should make sure we have the basics of?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my own story I always like to share is that when I started bleeding, and I was a little bit late, my menstruation started a little bit later in my life, it continued for the 2nd day, and I was completely surprised. I had no idea that I was going to bleed for more than a day, and that it was actually going to be, 5 to 7 days. And I was so angry that I didn't know this, and that I was going to bleed a week of every month for the rest of my life, only to realize that no one told me about menopause either. It's not going to be forever. But yeah, and so I wasn't even introduced to this topic until I needed it for birth control. So I was in my early 20s. I needed something that was non-hormonal. So I had known when I was younger, like just intuitively, that I didn't want to be on any kind of birth control. And I was one of the lucky ones that had really easy cycles. I had no period pain. I was very regular. And so I wasn't one of the people that needed birth control for medical reasons, which we can talk more about that in a bit too, and how the pill does not regulate or fix anything about someone's cycle.
Really? Well, you're blowing my mind already. Okay, we'll come back to that.
But I thought there was no need for me to be, because many of us are on the pill for, heavy periods, or for acne, or for medical reasons, not just contraception. So I didn't fall into that. I didn't need it. And it wasn't until in my early 20s, I had a partner who had an unplanned pregnancy with someone. So he had said, no, you need to be on the pill. And so I kind of reluctantly agreed. And by now I'd already had friends who had had experiences that were, pretty nasty, right? With like weight gain or, changes in their mood. So I wrote myself a manifestation letter. I'm like, I'm going to take the pill, and I'm going to it's going to be amazing. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to have amazing skin. I'm going to feel great. I'm going to have unprotected sex with my boyfriend whenever I want, without fear of pregnancy, and I just,
you're convincing yourself.
Yeah. It didn't even work. Not even a year went by, and it was just awful. So my hair was all falling out. My face had really bad acne. I was either raging in tears or in anger. Like, my mood swings were horrible. And so I had to quit, and I had to find something else, but it had to be non-hormonal. Like, I didn't want anything with, you hear about the low dose with like the IUD, or, you have the progesterone only, and the shot. And I didn't want anything. And so I had thought about maybe like a copper IUD, but my mom was quick to say like, no, don't put anything in your uterus. And I'd even considered finding the Nuva ring. They finally got me with like the low dose, Nuva ring. But I brought the Nuva ring home to my partner at the time, and he laughed at me and said, "You are not putting that penis strangling apparatus up your vagina." I've never seen what the Nuva ring looks like. So that didn't go in. So eventually I finally discovered the fertility awareness method of birth control. And how it works is you learn to identify when you're fertile and when you're not. And when you're fertile, you can abstain to get the most effectiveness out of the method, or you can use your fertility awareness practice to know when you're fertile and know that you need to use a barrier method and rely on the barrier method for contraception. Because did you realize that as women and people with cycles, we're not fertile every single day?
I think that's something that even me, I don't really fully understand that. I just know that you have your period once a month, and it's even a blur. Like, see, for me, I always took birth control. Ever since I was sexually active, I just took birth control because that just made the most sense for me. That was immediately what I thought of. And I also experienced a lot of those side effects that you're talking about. I had a lot of acne, I had a lot of mood swings, but I really just kind of like sucked it up for a long time. Recently, the past couple of years, I tried out a few different things like the IUD. I eventually went back to birth control, but on a different type. And it seems to have worked well for me. But that being said, it's like I just took the birth control and I had my period, and that's all I really know. I don't, can you get pregnant on your period? When, are you fertile? You said every day or not every day?
So you're not fertile every single day. We're only fertile about 6 days per cycle.
But is it like we're kind of less fertile the other days? I think we're a little scared of the other days,
I'm so glad that you said that. So
we're scared.
I don't like the idea. I don't like using the language more or less fertile.
Okay.
Because it's like, think about pregnancy. You're either pregnant or you're not. You can't be a little bit pregnant, right? But once you're pregnant, you can be closer and closer to your due date, right? So our fertility works the same way. When we're fertile, we're fertile. But when we're fertile and we get closer and closer to ovulation, you may notice, different kinds of cervical mucus, for example. But we are only fertile for 6 days because the egg, when we release an egg from the ovary, which is the event called ovulation, the egg, do you want to guess how long the egg has to live when it's actually left the ovary?
I want to say it's not very long.
12 to 24 hours.
Okay.
It's a miracle we get pregnant at all.
That's
so this
true.
Egg that we just spent all month long maturing and preparing is left the ovary, and it has less than a day to be fertilized. So what increases the fertile window to 6 days then is the fact that cervical mucus allows sperm to live in our cervix for up to 5 days.
Okay.
So you have like a hotel de la sperm right there in your body.
That's amazing. Wow. So that increases your chances, not only the 6 days that you're ovulating, but also the 5 days before and not after, right? So 5 days before you have a chance of being pregnant, and then for the 6 days you ovulate?
Yeah. So ovulation is an event that happens only once per cycle.
Okay.
When it's ovulating, it's only a day. So to say we're ovulating for 6 days would be incorrect, because ovulation, all it is when the egg bursts from the ovaries, or the ovary, excuse me, and it lives for a day. So ovulation is an event that happens once in your cycle and it lasts for 24 hours. That's it. So to say I'm ovulating, it's actually kind of tricky, because you can't know exactly what day you're ovulating unless you have like an ultrasound. Right? Some people will feel something called Mittelschmerz, which is just German for middle pain. So they might actually feel a little, left or right lower abdominal twinge or pain, or, maybe even like a little stabbing, right, where we don't even know what it means. We think maybe it's because of prostaglandins being released when the egg leaves the ovary, or maybe it's the fimbriae of your fallopian tube contracting to pick up that egg. So there are signs that we can confirm that we've ovulated, but the actual day of ovulation is hard to pinpoint without an ultrasound. You can pinpoint your days of fertility, however, using biological signs of fertility that you pay attention to on a daily basis. So the first one is cervical mucus. So when estrogen levels are high and you're getting close to ovulation, the cervix opens and releases cervical mucus. So when you see mucus, you know you are fertile. And so when I say I'm fertile, what that means is my cervix is open, I'm close to ovulation, and sperm can live in the cervix for up to 5 days.
Okay.
So you are ovulating for 1 day in your cycle, but you are fertile for 6. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. So should the first sign of that you're saying is sort of the mucus, sort of is like a dead giveaway? And I never really paid too much close attention, as I'm sure maybe many of us are new to paying attention to those signs within our body. So if there's a lot of mucus, I would have just assumed that maybe you were stimulated by something. So does that impact it at all? Because like, say you watch something sexual, or you kiss someone or something like that, don't you get mucus from that? Or no, it's different?
What a great question.
I'm very curious about all this on a personal level because I don't understand it. So I'm like the audience member myself.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And one of the first signs, or one of the first skills that you need to learn when you become fertility aware, is how to identify the difference between cervical mucus and other stuff that comes out of your vagina. Okay. Arousal fluid, vaginal cell slough, seminal fluid, right? And so arousal fluid is what you're referring to. Arousal fluid is not a fertile fluid. So it doesn't have anything to do with our fertility like cervical mucus does. Cervical mucus comes from the cervix, and it is visible at our vulva or on our toilet paper when estrogen levels are high and we're close to ovulation.
Okay.
Arousal fluids, these come from 2 glands called the Bartholin's glands that are very close to the entrance of your vagina, and they have nothing cyclical about them. Why they release their fluid, arousal fluid, is to lubricate and prepare the vagina for penetration, right? Whether that's with, a toy or a finger or, a penis. And so it has everything to do with your arousal and not with your fertility. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
So context is the first thing you have to pay attention to. So if you are aroused, then expect to see arousal fluid. The second thing is arousal fluid. It's very stringy, and it doesn't have what I call staying power. So when you play with it, it kind of just rubs away. Whereas cervical mucus, it's a hydrogel, and it has more staying power, meaning if you rub it or finger test it, it would hold its characteristics.
Okay. Because you said stringy, so I was thinking stringy is more like the mucus one, but you were saying stringy is the other one?
Yeah, because if you were to finger test it, it's almost like arousal fluid is like there's almost barely nothing there. It's just like
I see what you mean. Yes.
Whereas mucus, there's more sustenance to it. There's more something there.
Okay.
One of my favorite tests is a water test. Now, this is more just for fun. You're not going to do this every single time you see mucus or arousal fluid, but to increase your confidence in identifying the difference. If you were to put arousal fluid in a glass of water, it would disintegrate. It would dissolve in the water. If you were to put cervical mucus in the glass of water, it would form a ball that you could see rolling around in the glass of water.
Okay, so if you wanted to
they're very different. They come from different parts of our body, and they have different roles that they play in our body. And so identifying the different fluids that come out of our vagina is one of the first steps of becoming fertility aware.
Okay. That makes sense. That's sort of a first step to understanding it. I have a better understanding now of sort of how it works with the cycle and all of that. So very interesting. And so you said the other days you really can't get pregnant. I mean, like if you were to really get this down to not a science, but like really be aware of your body and the cycle of it, can you be confident enough to have sex without any sort of other birth control on those days that are on the opposite end of your ovulation?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can?
And that's what the fertility awareness method is. So the fertility awareness method of birth control is identifying your times of fertility through these daily observations of your signs of fertility. And when you're not fertile, pregnancy is not possible. So cervical mucus is the first one. If you want to increase your confidence and your awareness, you can add basal body temperature. You can add cervical position. And you can even become clear on the changes that happen, other physical changes, like maybe breast tenderness or other emotional changes, like your mood will change throughout your cycle. So these can also, I wouldn't rely on these alone for birth control, but they'll be complementary to the other signs. So we have a rule in the fertility awareness method, and it's when in doubt, consider yourself fertile and wait 3 days. Okay. Now, when I first started learning the method, like many other women and people with cycles, I got angry at first. I got angry that nobody ever told me this. That nobody told me that I'm only fertile 6 days per cycle, and that, most of the time my vagina is a sperm killing machine. you know? And what I realize now is that the fear that we kind of instill into people, especially young people, that you can get pregnant every other day, this is the when in doubt rule. So if you're not sure when you're fertile or when you're not, then it's a very responsible and legitimate thing to do, is to consider yourself fertile. So when you're not aware and you're not observing your cervical mucus patterns, you're not taking your basal body temperature every morning, you're not checking your cervical position every night, and you don't know where you are in your cycle, then it's very reasonable to consider yourself fertile every single day.
I think that's why there's a lot of misconceptions, and that we don't even know these basic things about how our body functions, because there's sort of this fear, or that society has in general, of, you don't want to encourage your teenage daughters or anything like that to get pregnant. So it's just like, we're not really taught all these sort of details. And it's just, kind of this fear that, you can get pregnant at any time. So it's very interesting. So you said that there are those other steps. So is that something you do every day to really, take this method and make it effective? As you said, every night you check cervical position and all of that. So, but this is also a great alternative because it's non-hormonal and it's natural, and it's really giving, either way, even if you're backing yourself up with birth control, you're just taking the control back of your own body, really.
Exactly. So even if you're using, for example, like other non-hormonal birth control, like, internal or external condoms, or a diaphragm, or a cervical cap, right? So you can still use barrier methods with the awareness that when you're fertile. But, many people, they'll tell me that or especially parents or doctors will say it's too hard to learn. Like, we can't expect anyone to learn how to do this. And I don't agree with that. We drive cars. If you could learn to operate a machine, you can learn the rules of the road. You learn how to drive safer in different seasons, right? If we can learn how to drive a car, we can learn how to understand the signs of our body. And just like learning to drive a car, when I started learning here in Edmonton, Alberta, where I live, we can start driving at 14 years old.
Oh, wow.
And so we can have our learners. Well, as long as we have somebody who has their license with us, we can drive a car. So we can trust 14-year-old people to drive cars. Then I can trust a 14-year-old to start paying attention to our cervical mucus. Yeah. But just like my driver trainer told me, expect a bump, right? I'm going to, run into a garbage can, or I'm going to, turn into the wrong lane, right? Like, I'm learning. It's a new skill you're learning. And then the more you do it, the more confident you get. And so that's why I feel super passionate about people practicing fertility awareness right from the get-go, right from when they start their period. Because when you're, I've known people as young as 7, 8, 9 years old who start their first period. Right, on average, it's usually around 12 or 13, but they're not concerned with birth control at this age, are they?
Of course.
So it's a fantastic time to start paying attention and learning about your body. Whereas most of my clients are in their 20s and 30s. And they're like, okay, I want to learn this like yesterday. How can you just yesterday?
Think of all that time that you could have had where you could have, not been on medication or anything like that. And I think it's just really empowering to really understand this. You don't want to be in the dark about your own body and how your systems work, especially we're so amazing as women that we can create babies and all of these things. I mean, it's incredible. How could we not dive into this and find out really how it works? We shouldn't be afraid to ask those sorts of questions. And I did hear that, sort of as the generations go, women are getting their periods younger and younger. Like you said, some are 7, 8, 9. And my doctor, my OBGYN, was saying that they don't really understand exactly why that is. We're not sure if it's the food or hormones in food, but it's amazing how things are kind of slowly changing. So I think, like you said, when you were a kid and you got your period, you felt really in the dark that no one explained it to you. I'm thinking back to getting my period. I think I was I want to say 12, could have been 11, but I want to say 12. And I didn't even, honestly, to be honest, I didn't even understand that I had a vagina until I got my period, because I'm not sure exactly what the technical terms are, but unless you actually insert your fingers or do something, there's no reason really to find that area. So I didn't really understand where it was, and I didn't take sex education. So I got my period and I was like, oh, this is what a tampon's for. I didn't understand even where that part was. So it was it made it very confusing. I was like, and you're afraid to ask these questions. So I think it's important that even before your daughter starts having her period, you're kind of open to the conversation, because you don't want her to feel blindsided and it's something to be ashamed of when it's really not.
I don't know how many periods I had when I realized that the urethra and the vagina was 2 different holes. So I would actually pull out my cotton tampon to pee every time I went to the bathroom.
I still do that.
Oh, you can pee with something inserted, right? Because your vagina is a completely different location than your urethra. So the vagina is the canal, right? So if you the hallway, if you will, to the uterus, where the lining of the uterus is what breaks down and sheds. It goes through the cervix and out the vagina. Your urethra is the hole and the hallway, if you will, to your bladder. So having a tampon or a menstrual cup inserted into your vagina is not going to obstruct you from urinating. You can leave it in and still pee. Make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It's sort of like basics, and we don't even know these things, really. Yeah. Some of the other things that I'm sure, it's kind of common knowledge, I would assume these days, but I know you're supposed to pee after you have sex, right? Because that's really good for your health, for the urethra, even though it's not connected. It's just anything could get sort of lodged or anything, right? Yeah. So, I mean, that's good for your health. Another thing that amazed me to learn was that when you have that sort of like thick blood from your period, I thought that was the egg. But that's not. That's the lining, right? Or that's just, is it blood clots or what is that?
So when you bleed in menstruation, when you're bleeding, it's not just blood. It is blood, but it's also endometrial lining, the endometrial tissue. So this is something I can do even just when you're listening. So for everyone, for yourself and anyone who's listening, if you stand up and you put your thumbs together at your belly button and you place your fingers down and just bring together your pointer fingers. If you take your pinky and your ring finger and you tap, that's where your ovaries are.
Oh, okay.
Take your pointer and your middle and tap, that's where your uterus is. So your uterus, during your cycle, your uterus will grow a lining. And this is in preparation of possible fertilization. But if no fertilization occurs, then that egg that was released from the ovary, it will either just disintegrate or it may come out with menstruation. So menstruation is when the lining sheds. And so the lining is made up of blood. It's made up of endometrial tissue. It might even have some mucus in it from the cervix because it has to pass through the cervix. So that's what menstruation is. Yeah. It may have contained the egg, which is visible to the human eye and is the largest cell in the human body, by the way.
Oh, wow. Really?
But it also we don't know because nobody studies. No one is studying women, right? But so we're not 100% sure.
How could it be that we're not 100% sure? Really? They don't study this very closely? Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh, we need to put more funding. Is it bad to not get your period? Because, for me, I take birth control and I take continuous dosing because I started doing that after I had my son, and maybe we can talk about how things change, when you have a baby. I feel like everything changed for me after I had a baby. First of all, I went back on birth control afterwards and I didn't have the same problems with the acne and the mood swings and all of that. So I was wondering, so I'm on continuous dosing for birth control. And after I had my son, I sort of was so busy as a mom, I didn't even really want to take a moment out to get my period anymore because I was used to for 9 months not getting my period. And I was like, this is great. I don't have to deal with this anymore. So I went to my doctor and she said, you can do continuous dosing for your birth control. So I did that. So sometimes I get my period, sometimes it's light and all of that. But is it bad for you to not get your period? Like, are we supposed to shed that blood in that lining? Is that not good for us? Because I know there's a lot of different methods, like different IUDs that allow you to not get your period really at all. I did try a couple of those IUD methods and I didn't really find it comfortable, especially for sex. I didn't find it comfortable. It was really why I didn't choose to go on that route. But I was wondering, is it healthy for us to not get our periods? Because it's not natural, it doesn't seem.
Well, first of all, let me define what a period is for you. So a period or menstruation is a bleeding event that follows ovulation by about 2 weeks.
Okay.
So the first thing I'm going to invite you to do is to stop calling it your period on hormonal birth control because you're not having a period when you're on hormonal birth control. You are having a bleeding event. It's called a withdrawal bleed. But because hormonal birth control works by preventing you from ovulating, if you're not ovulating, you're not having a period.
Okay.
So when you ask me, is periods important? The answer is yes, because ovulation is important. So this is even just coming back to our discussion around teens and fertility awareness. One of my biggest pet peeves is when we think of our fertility only as important for having children. But it's not just about having kids. It's great. If you want kids, it's very necessary. But once we become reproductive, once we start cycling, what that means is we've started ovulating. And ovulation, it drives our whole cycle. And with ovulation, we have changes in our hormones. So, for example, the hormone I've already mentioned, estrogen, is the hormone that's dominant in the first half of the phase that causes ovulation. And then after ovulation, progesterone becomes dominant. So we need to ovulate in order to make progesterone. So without ovulation, women and people with cycles don't make a substantial amount of progesterone. So this estrogen and progesterone, it drives the cycle. It's what causes ovulation and then menstruation, but that's not it. So we have receptors for estrogen and progesterone all over our body. They're responsible for our bone health. They're responsible for our breast health, for our brain and our mental health. That's why we have found people that have been on hormonal birth control for so long now have osteoporosis. Wow. Because their bones have suffered for not having estrogen and progesterone. Or it increases your chance of breast cancer because it affects your breast health or your moods. So when people tell me they go off hormonal birth control, they feel like a fog has been lifted, or they can think clearly again, or they don't have these mood swings anymore. And it's because estrogen and progesterone, they're all important for all of these things. Our libido, our size of our ovaries and our clitoris, our skin health, our heart, cardiovascular health, everything is affected by our hormones. So when you have a doctor who puts you on hormonal birth control and stops you from ovulating, stop making these hormones, and your whole body is going to be affected by this.
Is that
so periods are important because ovulation is important.
That makes sense a lot. So what happens to us that are on like IUDs or the continuous dosing or even just hormonal birth control where things are sort of more simulated, how does that affect us? Am I missing some progesterone that I should be getting and all of that?
Oh, yeah. If you're on a hormonal birth control, you're not getting any progesterone. No.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you are having progestins, like levonorgestrel, for example. So that is a synthetic form of progestin, but that's not progesterone. Right. So it's a steroid hormone that is different than our natural hormones. Estrogen is what we want. Estradiol is one of the estrogens that our bodies make. People on hormonal birth control, you're getting synthetic forms like ethinyl estradiol. That's not the same as our estrogen and progesterone. So for example, progesterone, natural progesterone, makes my hair grow and thick and be shiny and beautiful. I have my hair in a bun, so you can't see, how gorgeous my hair is. When I was on hormonal birth control, the progestin, the synthetic version of the progesterone, it made all my hair fall out.
Oh, okay.
So you see how they don't have the same effects, right?
You can see that a lot when you have a baby too, because your hair starts growing so beautifully and your skin and the glowing thing is a real thing. You just
because when you're pregnant, your estrogen and progesterone are so high. And I'm glad that you brought that up because what doctors will tell us, and tell me if you've heard this before, that when you're on hormonal birth control, it's like tricking your body into thinking it's pregnant.
Yes, I have. And that's what I sort of thought it was. I thought that was the easy example of it. Is it true or
no,
what do you think?
It's not true at all.
Oh no, it's a mythbusters right now. Okay.
Yes, being pregnant means that your estrogen and your progesterone are skyrocketing. They're getting higher and higher every single day.
Okay.
Hormonal birth control, depending on what kind of hormonal birth control you're on, like if it's a combined pill, for example, you're taking little bits of synthetic estrogen and synthetic progesterone every single day. So you're resulting in no shift in your hormones that we would naturally see, and they're not getting any higher like we would in pregnancy. In fact, the closest hormonal profile we would see this is in a person who's menopausal. So if anything, you're in a chemically induced menopause, which is why many people who are on a hormonal birth control experience signs and symptoms like as if they were menopausal, like vaginal dryness, low libido, a decrease in their bone health. So these are all things that would naturally happen to us as we age and become menopausal.
I'm longing right now to be off of birth control and be my natural self. But at the same time, I love the convenience. and I'm like, is there something I can do? Maybe can you take supplements, things like that won't really fix it in those ways? And I really love all the benefits that you're listing about really kind of going the holistic natural approach. And I really, really think that it's important that either way we know these things about our bodies. And for me, I still don't want to give up the convenience of it though. Is there like, women's vitamins that we should also look into or things like that? Maybe that help?
I mean, for sure. Number one, it's funny because people think I'm anti-pill, based on, you know, how I talk about the pill, and I'm not.
No,
I think that there are many reasons. Yes,
you're pro-awareness.
That's it. I just want people to know. So for example, this is an excellent question. Okay, well, I like the convenience of not bleeding and not, you know, being, you know, not ovulating. So what should I do then? So knowing that all these side effects are happening, what should I do? So one of the side effects of hormonal birth control is it's like a vacuum for all of your nutrients. So it requires a lot of your minerals and your nutrients to even metabolize these synthetic hormones. So if you're on hormonal birth control, one of the first things that you should do is start taking a multivitamin. Just to make sure that you are replenishing all of your B vitamins, you know, your magnesium, your zinc, all of these things that your body requires to metabolize these synthetic hormones. So yeah, I would recommend getting on like a multivitamin.
I'm going to do that for sure. And what about, like, some people say you should take pregnancy vitamins just, you know, in your everyday life. Is that something that you recommend doing also? Because for me, I'm always cold, and I asked my doctor, and I'm not low in iron, but for some reason, when I had my son, it was the only time in my life I was never cold. And I think it was maybe, I'm not sure if it was the pregnancy or was it the fact that I was taking these pregnancy vitamins. And I've heard that a lot, even from my doctor before, to just take pregnancy vitamins just because they're good for you, because eventually you might have another baby or something. How do you feel about that?
Let me ask you this. What's the difference between a woman's multivitamin and a prenatal?
Oh my goodness. I don't even know.
And this
a minute ago, I didn't know about my period.
So nothing, right?
Okay.
I mean, albeit the prenatal might have more of the good stuff. So in that case, yeah, go for the prenatal.
But it's targeting us as women both ways.
Because here's the thing. It's unfortunate that we only view our fertility as important for us when we want to have a baby. This is one of the messages I want to leave with you and your listeners today, is that our fertility is important for your whole health, not just for your fertility. And tell every single daughter and woman and girl you know who starts her period, yes, this is a fantastic thing for your health. It is not, oh, great, now you can have a baby, you know? So absolutely, if you're taking vitamins that are helpful for you to make a baby, then those same vitamins are going to be helpful for you, for your overall health. Because in order to make a baby, we have to have good overall health. And being a woman or a person who cycles in their reproductive years, fertility is a reflection of your health.
That makes sense.
So for example, with your coldness, you know, I don't know, that's all I know about you, but like one of the first things that I would encourage you to learn about your health is your thyroid health. So your thyroid health is the #1 disruptor of menstrual cycle health. So of course, being on hormonal birth control might be affecting your thyroid as well. And when you are on your prenatal vitamin, you may have been giving the nutrients that your thyroid needs, like iodine and selenium, tyrosine. You were probably giving all of your thyroid the things that it needs. And you found that your thyroid health improved, which would improve your thermal regulation. So your thyroid is like, it releases hormones that are like the key to every engine in every cell of your body.
Okay, so the thyroid is very important.
Or lethargic, or, you know, exhausted all the time, especially if you have cold hands and feet, it may be that your thyroid is not working up to your optimal level.
Okay, that makes sense. So that's something to check.
Yeah, this is one, and this is why I love charting and fertility awareness, and how it's not just about conceiving or avoiding pregnancy. That's like the cherry on the top. Ice cream to fertility awareness is the body literacy you gain and the knowledge you gain about your health. So for example, when I'm looking at someone's chart and I'm looking at their cervical mucus patterns, or when I'm looking at their basal body temperature, or other signs that they've noticed, like cold hands and feet, then that gives us clues on what might need attention.
Okay, that makes sense.
Thyroid health is like one of the #1 things I'm always looking at for people.
Because really, this is a matter of just helping your body function the way it's meant to, you know, and just understanding that. And then if you add anything else onto it, birth control, no birth control, all of that, it's you want to still understand how your body works and make sure that's functioning correctly. So definitely thyroid, that's something that I'll definitely check into. And then as you said, it's not only important to understand this, to understand how to have a baby, but the flip side of fertility awareness is I know there's a lot of women that really are trying to conceive. And is that something that you focus on as well, is really understanding how to conceive and all of that, where you're a fertility educator? Or is that, I know it's a big, huge topic.
No, did you know that they had a study, they did a study where people were seeking out fertility treatments, and they found that less than 13%, I think it was like 12.7% of the people in this study knew how to identify their fertile time.
Okay.
So that's pretty important if you're trying to conceive.
For sure.
And if you know when to identify your fertile time, then you can save yourself a hell lot of money and not have to go through infertility clinics.
You can hopefully maybe conceive before you get to that level.
Exactly. And again, that's like, take me, for example. I'll be 33 this month, and I've always known that I would have children later in my life. I just always knew. So one of the reasons why I knew charting was going to be important to me is because I was going to be able to monitor the health of my cycle every single month to know that, oh, everything is going right and everything is, you know, fine. And I don't have any underlying medical conditions or hormone imbalances, so that when I am ready to conceive, I don't all of a sudden realize, what? I mean, I haven't been ovulating for the past 5-10 years of my life, or what? I have a thyroid condition that's preventing me from getting pregnant, or what? My progesterone levels are low and I'm experiencing miscarriages, right? So I've been able to watch my fertility unfold for the past 10 years and know that, you know, I'm doing fine, or maybe I'm not. And so here's what I can do to, you know, improve my health. So there's a lot of body literacy. Like, I mean, even myself in my own story, like it's funny, when I first started charting, I have like these quote unquote perfect cycles, right? And when I started, what I've done is I started charting, and then I got so excited to teach this to other people that I enrolled in the Justice College International, which is a 2-year full-time program to learn about the menstrual cycle. And so I essentially have my master's in the menstrual cycle, if you will. Wow. And I entered that college wanting to teach people birth control. But I left like knowing less than when I started. I had no idea fibroids was a thing. I had no idea people had PCOS or endometriosis. I had no idea that people bled intermittently throughout their cycle, because like you said yourself, no one's talking about this.
No, so we don't even know the warning signs.
Yeah, and my experience, I assume, is everyone's experience, right? Everyone's period just comes on pain-free and feels great. Everyone has, you know, cycles that are between 25 and 36 days. So I learned about how the menstrual cycle is a 5th vital sign, just like your, you know, breathing rate, just like your blood pressure. How your menstrual cycle is unfolding is a reflection of your whole health. So I thought to myself, well, how am I going to help people understand their cycle and their health better if even I have never had to, like, you know, if I've never had these problems? Well, let me tell you, did I eat those words? Because in the 10 years that I have been paying attention to my menstrual cycle, I've had 6 months of anovulation.
Really?
You know, I've had luteal phases. I've had, you know, depression symptoms and hypothyroid symptoms, and they've all come out in my cycle.
And if you're not paying attention, then you're going to not even know that. And you won't know why you're having these depressions and all of those things.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
And so for me, when I was, you know, there are certain times in my life where I was, you know, experiencing depressive episodes, and I was experiencing, you know, eating disorders, and times when my thyroid wasn't up to par. And the cycle for me, my charts were confirming, like, yeah, shit is crazy, Chloe. It's crazy. And for me, I loved that feedback, because so many of us go to our doctors and say, I don't feel good. Something is wrong. Like this can't be right. And your doctor does a lab test. You know, they draw some blood, they run it through some tests, and what do they tell you? Fine, go home, right? And so my charts were like someone telling me things are not fine, and that's okay. It's temporary.
Because stress affects that a lot too, right? And so it's sort of like like you said, it's a measure of our overall health. So, and a lot of times we get dismissed as women, especially in doctors' offices and things like that. And it kind of is in relation to this, because we're considered overly emotional or overly hormonal. And you know what? We should kind of take the power back to that and say, you know what? We are, and I'm going to, you know, watch my hormones and all those things, and watch my stress levels and all of that. So it's a barometer for us.
Oh, I love that you said that. And even just with the second half of our cycle, right? That's the post-ovulatory phase, or we can also call it the premenstrual phase, where we have some, you know, premenstrual signs coming up, which might be some moodiness. And
I cry the day before I get my period. I cry. So if I'm ever crying randomly, I go, oh, okay, I'm fine. You're going to get your period tomorrow, Jessica. Every time. I'll be in my car listening to music. I'm like, why am I so upset for no reason?
And it's not, there is always a reason, right? And so in this case, that we're very sensitive to these hormones. And when the progesterone and the estrogen drop, that's what signals the period. And it's that drop in progesterone that causes a lot of these changes. And even on hormonal birth control, if you stop taking those synthetic hormones, you're withdrawing those synthetic hormones, which is causing that bleed. But when you learn to chart your cycle and you learn the different phases of your cycle, and one of the things that I love to talk about in my period positivity workshops that I put on for parents and preteens is how our emotions change throughout the cycle, and that it's normal to not be or feel the same every single day. And taking that power back when you understand your cycle awareness, those last 2 weeks of your cycle, or even that last week of your cycle, that's the week I get to tell you I'm taking a break. And I get to tell you, you know, I need some time for myself. That's not when you get to tell me that I'm being bitchy or moody.
Yes. You take some self-care back for yourself.
Changing that dialogue.
Yes.
Exactly.
I absolutely love that. That's really powerful to share with us, Chloe. And I hope that everyone out there listening feels a little bit more empowered to understand themselves. And if you have daughters out there, I think that it's important as a society and a culture that we start changing the dialogue around this. And like you said, we're not being moody and bitchy and all of that. We need some extra love for ourselves and self-care. And our overall health is really important. And we need to start making that a top priority. Is there anything else that you want to share with us, Chloe, that you found that are any sort of common misconceptions or maybe warning signs that people don't know to be aware of with their own, you know, feminine health, or anything like that that you found has been really important sharing with your clients that you help?
Yeah. In fact, I made a video series called 28 Days, 28 Myths that you can find on my YouTube channel, where in videos less than a minute, I debunk myths about the fertility awareness method, about the menstrual cycle, and about the pill. So if you're interested in that topic, definitely go there. But I called it the 28-day, 28 myth video series because the very first myth that I debunked in that series is the myth of the 28-day cycle. So the idea that having a 28-day cycle is the only way to have a healthy cycle is not true. So it's when people come up to me and they tell me, Chloe, I have really irregular cycles, the first thing I need to ask them is, well, what does that mean to you? Because if that means I'm not, I'm not cycling every 28 days, like I don't have a period every 28 days, so there must be something wrong with me. Again, debunked. So it's normal to have cycles that are from 25 to 36 days. And a variation of up to 10 days is fine too. Meaning if I had a period, let's say 28 days or 26 days, and then next cycle it was 32 or 33 days, that's totally normal. And the reason why is because we're not wind-up clocks. And because stress delays ovulation and lengthens the cycle. So it's another pet peeve of mine when people tell me my period is late. Your period will never be late. It'll come on time when it's supposed to every single time. What's late is ovulation.
Oh, okay.
So if ovulation is delayed, then that will delay the period. Does that make sense?
It totally does. I'm assuming that stress is one of the biggest things that can really affect our cycles, right? Stress.
Absolutely. And we're talking, when we say stress, we often think of like a traffic jam or, a deadline, but it can be physical stress, like exercising too much or not exercising enough. It can be emotional stress, like stress of, a pandemic, fighting with your partner, or, the stress of, like a deadline coming. It can be chemical stress. So that means like having a toxic load of xenoestrogens or other chemicals from our beauty products to our cleaning products to the food we eat. So all of this encompasses stress when we say stress. Another myth I love to debunk is the myth that period pain is normal.
Oh, okay.
So even though most of us have it, and we like to complain about the inconvenience and the pain of a period, your periods should not be debilitatingly painful.
Okay. So
you are shedding the endometrial lining of your uterus. So there will be some discomfort. Don't get me wrong, right? Menstruation is absolutely an invitation for you to rest and slow down. However, many of us are experiencing pain that requires us to pop a pill every single day or numerous times throughout the day, or cancel plans, or stay in bed wrapped up in the fetal position. Like this is not okay.
Yes.
And the period is not the problem. Your period is the messenger. It's revealing what needs attention. Maybe it's a hormonal imbalance. Maybe it's an underlying medical condition. Maybe it's a food allergy or a nutrient deficiency, right?
Okay.
So taking this information, not as that this is normal or this is a problem, but as an invitation of something needs my attention.
What's really resonating with me after the last hour of sort of getting this basic 101 sort of education that I feel like I missed out on when I was younger is really just understanding that your period is a barometer for your overall health. And
Yes.
it's really just, we want to be in our, and that's really what Stay Calm Mom is all about, is just being your best self, and your health is super important. So this awareness is just asking you to put yourself first, put your own health first, put your own self-care first, and your own self-love when you need different rests and different sort of attention for yourself during the course of these cycles. So that's excellent. So if anyone's experiencing pain or anything like that, should we ask our doctors and sort of like get to the root cause of that? Is that something you see that's common?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if your doctor isn't listening to you, if your doctor is dismissing you,
yeah.
right, find a new doctor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's not normal.
And call Chloe. Where can we find you, Chloe?
Yeah.
where can we find you, Chloe, and learn more about you and connect with you more?
So I'm Chloe Skerlak. You can find me via my name on, all of the places. So my website is Chloe Skerlak. So that's CHLOESKERLAK. You can find me on all of the social medias, on Instagram or Facebook, or the new fun Clubhouse. Again, just at Chloe Skerlak. And my YouTube channel is definitely a fun place to go watch some short, quick, very informative and illuminating videos. And you can, again, just Google Chloe Skerlak in YouTube and you'll find me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chloe. As we speak, I recognize that I forgot to take my pill last night. So after we get off here, Chloe, I'm going to take my pill. and with that, I'll leave you, Stay Calm Moms out there. And thank you so much, Chloe, for joining us today and sharing all of your knowledge with us in your life.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I do want to invite everyone who's listening. If you are curious about fertility awareness and how you can benefit and how you can make it a daily practice, I do co-facilitate a by donation charting circle. And since it's the pandemic, I'm doing it online, even though it would usually be in person here in my city. But we do it the last Monday of every month from 6:30 to 8:30 Mountain Standard Time. Everyone is welcome, regardless of your gender, your knowledge level, your sexual orientation. People can come in and just enjoy some juicy conversation about fertility awareness, share your stories, ask your questions. So if you want to know more about that, just go to fertilityawareness-charting-circle.org, or just get in touch with me, I give you the information. But yeah, so just to give you some next steps, because I know that this can all sound really overwhelming at first.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to, everything doesn't have to change overnight. It's just what's the one small step I can do now. So, joining the charting circle, or even just starting to pay attention to your cervical mucus with that toilet paper, right? Your toilet paper is your fancy dancy, super high tech cervical mucus checking tool. So just paying attention to your toilet paper when you use the bathroom is a great first step.
And for everyone out there listening too, we're going to share that link in the show notes. So anywhere you're listening, just click on that and you'll be able to take next steps with Chloe to really understanding your own health and you're getting better awareness. Thank you so much, Chloe. It's been a pleasure having you.
Oh, it's been so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.